So LEGO 2K Drive was an interesting game to play. After playing Rocket Racing, I was wondering how I was going to enjoy this game. One thing I have to mention, first and foremost, is the drift. For some reason with the drift, it appears that whenever you press the drift button, you're actually doing a hard turn. So you're like doing a hard pivot in the direction that you want to go in, rather than actually doing a drift like you would probably in Mario Kart. And by the way, this game pretty much seems to be a LEGO version of Mario Kart. So it's in that kind of relation of value. I don't really know how much I enjoyed this game or exactly how I believe this game stacks up as pretty much a competitor to Mario Kart. Because I will say this, I enjoy Mario Kart a whole lot more than LEGO 2K Drive. It is interesting that you can build your own carts. That's kind of cool, but when playing the game, it just really didn't grab my attention. The way that you gain boost, I don't like it. You basically, as far as I can understand it, as you drive around in, I think, water, you gain boost gauge. And then as you run into obstacles, you also gain boost gauge. Outside of that, I can't really tell how you gain boost gauge though. And again, I don't like the drift in the game because it's not an actual drift, it's a pivot. If you understand it as a pivot, it seems like it works alright, but I don't really understand how the momentum systems in the game works. It kind of seems like to me, you just spam out a lot of the powers that you're going to pick up as you're driving ahead. And then the boost mechanic is just a little bit annoying to constantly spam the boost button. I'm not exactly a fan of that either. But when playing this game, especially in comparison to Rocket Racing, which in Rocket Racing I think I prefer the drift mechanic, I think I prefer the way that the vehicle behaves and responds to the environment. However, I will say that in Rocket Racing, the environments and the tracks were really not that interesting or good to drive around. They weren't really that creative. And in LEGO 2K Drive, I would say that, yeah, it was a lot more creative. All of the tracks were a lot more interesting to look at and to play through. So I do like that element of the game. The tracks they weren't really that inspired or interesting. Better word would be unique. They weren't really that unique. But when driving through the levels, I was like, yeah, I'm not entirely that bored compared to a game like Rocket Racing. I don't really know if this game was intended or made to be a competitive experience in racing because it feels very casual to the point of I don't even know if it's really much of a competition, And specifically, what do I mean by this is just the fact that it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of ways to outmaneuver other people, truly, when you're playing. And a lot of the mechanics are more annoying than it is a mechanic which lengthens, let's say, your skill or just your ability to measure, gauge, and utilize all of the game's mechanics. So with all that being said, by the end of me playing this game, I just don't know if I was really digging it. I wasn't interested in continuing to play LEGO 2K Drive. Pretty much 30 minutes in, I was pretty much done. Again, interesting tracks. The racing mechanics were okay. They were alright. They were passable. And then the fact that you and other people can create vehicles. And by the way, you have 3 vehicles. You have off-roading, you have on-track, and you have C. Okay, so you kind of have a race car, you have a dirt bike, and you have a boat. And then you can make your own versions of all these vehicles. I mean, you have someone that made a brute chopper from Halo, and they put that into the game. So you can download that from the creator hub or whatever, and you can download that person's creation. Another person made a bulldozer and another person made a Minecraft pig that you can drive around like a vehicle. So that's kind of cool, but doesn't really keep me invested, of course, in the game. And I think for racing games, it's really hard to keep a lot of people's attention. I mean, seriously, what do you do to really make a racing game interesting? I've played a lot of racing games in the past. They were less cartoony and a lot more realistic, but you were able to demolish and destroy bits and parts of other vehicles, and that was supposed to be what was intriguing about the gameplay loop. Here in this game, the progression system's not interesting. The racing systems are pretty generic compared to other games, and I think other games do it better, right? I really do like Mario Kart. Compared to this, a whole lot more. Would I consider you pick up LEGO 2K Drive? I would say the answer's no. Honestly, it just didn't really do it for me.